So for this video, we're going to go ahead and take a look at one of the pre-made decks from Houses of Morrowind, one of the pre-constructed decks that you can purchase with gold and or money. And we're going to look at some minor changes that we can make that are very budget friendly and turn this into a slightly better deck if you're a new player, for example, and you're looking for something to take onto the ladder. So again, this is really geared towards new players or people with very small collections that want to take one of these pre-constructed decks and then improve it. And it's very similar to CVH's old Budgetify series. In fact, I'm going to use the exact same constraints that he did. So we're only going to recommend cards that are commons and rares, so no epics or legendaries. And it's only going to be stuff from pack-based sets. So core set, Heroes of Skyrim, Houses of Morrowind. Essentially, I don't want to make recommendations from either of the story modes because you may or may not have the gold, especially if you're a new player and you're free to play, to have purchased those. And the same thing goes with Forgotten Hero Collection and Madhouse Collection. Certainly there are going to be cards from those story modes and those collections that would probably fit really well in this deck and in future decks that we'll take a look at. But again, right now this is really kind of meant to showcase what can you either get from packs and or craft relatively inexpensively to make one of these decks be viable. Because again, story mode stuff you can't craft, collection stuff you can't craft, you have to actually purchase them. So that's going to be the constraints. Again, basically right along the same lines as CVH's old Budgetify series. Since he's a community manager now, he can't actually do these videos, so we're gonna take a crack. This video is gonna start with the Dagoth's Might deck. So this is the Strength, Intelligence, Agility tricolor pre-made deck. This one is kind of loosely focused on taking advantage of creatures that have 5 or more power. You're gonna see that show up in cards like Fighters Guild Steward. You're going to see that show up in cards like, where was it? Ash Piercer, there it is. You're going to see it show up in things like, where is our other buddy here? Ash Berserker, that's another one. Things like that. And then kind of also along that path, Sixth House Amulet, that's another one that kind of feeds into it. But in that similar path, there's also in this pre-made deck a lot of cards that are meant to serve as ways to trigger those things. So for example, Deranged Corpus might not look super outstanding at first glance, but the +5/+0 on your turn means that you're going to get triggers from any of these other abilities that the deck focuses around. So that is kind of what this deck is aiming to do. Now that being said, this deck is very mid-rangey. You're going to be using big creatures to kind of fight for control of the board, punch people in the face, and so as such we're going to make our decisions as we go forward and our suggested changes as we go forward. We're going to make them based on if this were going to become a mid-range deck. Now there's a couple of different ways you can approach this. Personally, I'm one of those people that I actually like to overfill my decks and then make cuts. Now, some people like to go through and just pull out all of the fluff and then find stuff to fill it, but I personally just, as my deck building style, really enjoy sticking in everything that I know that I might want to include and then making it, make cuts after that. So, right out of the gate, in Strength, Intelligence, and Agility, there are some cards that are just going to be staples, especially for a mid-range deck like this. So for example, you'll see that we have like Wardcrafter here. Wardcrafter is a staple in almost every intelligence deck, and it certainly is a staple in intelligence decks that want to be mid-rangey. So we're going to go ahead and go to Wardcrafter, and we're going to stick in 2 more of those. While we're also going to stick in some Shrieking Harpies. So again, these are rares, but these are rares that are craftable, and these are rares that are in the core set. So those cards are pretty outstanding. So we want to go ahead and stick those in. Similarly, for a deck like this, other cards that might end up being very, very good, would it be something like Thieves Guild Recruit? We'll go ahead and stick in 2 more of those as well. Thieves Guild Recruit not only cycles, but if you have an expensive card, something that costs 7 or more, you can reduce the cost. And we do have things like Nyx Ox and so forth down below. So we're going to go ahead and stick in those as well because they cycle. Now, there's also a case to be made for something like Goblin Skulk. Goblin Skulk can then go and fetch curses. That's very tempo oriented, but because we're not going to have a lot of the cards that necessarily take the best advantage of that, and by that I mean like Leaf Lurkers, we are going to stick in 1 Leaf Lurker. That's going to be the one card where I actually kind of break my rules, if you will, and I'm going to go do that now. We'll put in one of the shiny alternate art ones just for giggles here. We're going to put in 1 Leaf Lurker, and that's because if you have completed the just regular story mode, regular campaign, when you very first start playing this game, you do get access to 1 Leaf Lurker. So we are going to put in 1 Leaf Lurker just because everybody should have access to that in their collection. If you've not done the story mode, go back, do that. While we're here in the 5s, 5s is a really strong slot for agility. We're going to go ahead and stick in 3 Cliff Racers, 3 Face Racers, if you will, because they are very, very good. Crafting them is a safe craft if you have not already crafted them in the past. And now we're going to go ahead and start thinking about other ways that we can get some value out of our cards. So what we're really looking for are things that can potentially trigger some synergy with our needing cards that have 5 power. So Morkel Gatekeeper, again, from the core set is great. Not only does it have Prophecy, not only does it have Guard, but the ability to give a creature +2/+0 that isn't necessarily on this body is pretty important in a deck like this, because pumping something up means we might start getting our Ash Berserker triggers. So we're going to go ahead and stick in some of those as well while we're here. We're also going to hop back down and find our rally friends. So this is common, new from the set. This is a 1-drop, but the rally effect is yet another way that you can buff things in your hand. So that's a safe 1-drop, as is Steel Scimitar. Also, while we're here, another very commonly played card as a 1-drop is going to be Crown Quartermaster. The dagger that this puts in your hand, again, is something we can put on a creature later to potentially get our triggers from the Dagoth effects. And we're starting to get close to our cap, right? So we're going to have to start pulling some cards out so we can keep making some changes. So let's go ahead and start pulling out some of the fluff. The Corpus Disease, the silence is nice, the +2/+0 is nice, but this is kind of one of those weird cards in that you probably want to play this on your own creatures because you want the +2/+0, and the silence is not really being taken advantage of in this deck. If we were running more copies of Vigilant Ancestor, it would be worth it because you could silence this and then it's no longer permanently shackled. But since we're only running 1 and since it's an epic and we're not going to throw more in, getting rid of this is entirely safe. We're also going to go ahead and actually cut down on the amulets because the Steel Scimitars are going to serve the same purpose but are not as hard of a requirement. We're going to go ahead and cut off the finish off effects because we're not running a lot of pings. High Rock Summoner, while it does put things in your hand that... so this is interesting. Every one of the cards that this would put in your hand, they all have 5 power or more. So it's one of those cheeky includes that you may not see the synergy right away, but we're going to go ahead and make those cuts as well. We're also going to go ahead and cut Assassin's Bow, We're going to cut Burning Touch because this is just a really bad Firebolt. If we want, we can go back and stick in Firebolt, but I don't really think that's necessary right now. We'll cut all of the amulets, actually. We're going to leave Shadow Shift in for now, just as a general cycle and utility tool, but that might come out. We will also likely be sticking in another Awakened Dreamer here, but first we're going to make more cuts. The Oathman is great because if you do have Intelligence and Agility cards out, this becomes a 3-cost 5/5, and 5 is the magic number. Bat, however, we don't really have a lot of interactions with. It can be a great source of health gain, and you can buff it, but for now, we're not really playing control. Same thing here. We're going to go ahead and cut the Sentinel. The Prophecy is nice, but we don't really need it. So we're going to go ahead and continue on. Bog Lurcher is great in some combo decks, but not so great here because it's very brittle. We're going to go ahead and cut that. Imposter's Mission is something that you would have normally comboed with the Bog Lurcher, right? Following a Bog Lurcher, this could make a 9/9, but we're going to go ahead and leave that out. Plated Werebat. Elder Centaur is in just because, again, 5 cost and he hides himself. These are in here because of the 5 power. The problem is at 1 health, this card ends up being a liability. Like, the ward is fantastic, but there are so many minus effects. We're going to go ahead and safely cut this right now as well. This becomes a 6/6 guard, which is better than this. So let's go ahead and cut these. The Reapers can be good, but again, we're not really playing like that control strategy. The Ox is great. The Ogres are fine for now. These will likely get cut as well, but we're going to leave them for right now because we're back to 75. And now we need to start worrying about smoothing out our curve. So we need some 3-drops, and we need to likely cut out some 4-drops. And then we're also going to look for a little bit more high-end stuff as well. Hatchery Meddler, I am a big fan of. We might stick in some more of those, just kind of thinking ahead here. But let's go ahead and start with Awakened Dreamer. So Awakened Dreamer, not technically a 2-drop, really, it's a 3-drop here. Whoops. Fits our theme, so we're going to go ahead and stick that in. Again, that's a craftable rare. And then we're going to go back to our 3s. So we cut Camelorn Sentinel. Camelorn Hero is potentially an option. And the reason you might consider something like Camelorn Hero is because it has 4 attack, which means anything that gives +1 is enough for it to start triggering our Dagoth stuff. So like a dagger from Crown Quartermaster, for example, would be enough to get that up and running. And then when you look at the agility options, Eldergleam Matron is in the same boat, and that's actually the one that I'm going to ultimately recommend here. It's the reason I didn't start sticking in the Camelorns. Strictly just because getting the random animal into your hand, in my opinion, is better than the 2 damage. If we were running a deck that cared a little bit more about being outright aggressive or more reach, then the hero ends up being better with the 2 damage. But this is, again, going to play like a mid-range deck. So we're kind of focusing on, you know, what can we get out of it. And so again, this is a Heroes of Skyrim rare, so this is craftable. We're going to preemptively pull out these invaders because those are also not very good. We're also going to preemptively pull out the Ash Servants as well, because as much as I like that card, those are not really helping us. And if we go back and we check out Strength, Berserker of the Pale. So this is interesting. This is a Heroes of Skyrim card that when you summon another creature with 5 power or more, you give it +1/+1 and Breakthrough. So while it's not meant for necessarily Dagoth, it does theoretically interact with what we want to do. In terms of the budget options, though, again, because we're kind of looking to smooth out our curve, and come back on some of the 4 drops and include some more 3 drops, your best bet, in my opinion, is one of a couple of options. One is Berserker the Pale, but I'm actually going to suggest sticking in the Battle Spear. Again, we're having that mid-range strategy, and a lot of our cards are going to have high power but low health. And not only does this solve that problem, but it can buff things in your hand. So we're going to go ahead and stick in a couple of those. Then we're going to move on to some of our 4 drops, or other options. I'm a big fan of this guy, though I don't think it's going to end up meeting our needs here. I'm a big fan of the grappling hook as well. I must have already passed the card, so my apologies. Here it is, Ash Berserker. We're going to go ahead and jump this up because this is a great card draw, so we're going to go ahead and jump this up to 3 copies. Again, this is going to be craftable from Morrowind. This card is interesting because it does provide a tempo play. This one, however, unless you are pumping up its power in your hand through rally effects, and we don't necessarily have a ton right now, probably not that great. So we're going to go ahead and cut those. And then we just have to look at some more of our top end and give us a little bit more on the bottom. Other 4 drops that you might want to look at. So the biggest problem is there are a lot of cards in this deck that come from epics and legends that you might want to include. But good old Mystic Dragon, I know that a 4/4 for 4 seems pretty boring, but good old Mystic Dragon can sometimes get the old job done. Similarly, Green Pact Stalker is often underrated because of the summon. It's a 4-cost 5/6 guard oftentimes, and it turns out, again, 5 is our magic number for a deck like this. These are also some pretty fantastic options as well. Just kind of looking at the class stuff in general. There are some really, really strong cards, but again, a lot of these are rares, or excuse me, epics, legendaries, things like that we're not going to include. So let's go ahead and look at our top end stuff that we may want to stick in for finishers. We've already got Savage Ogres. Here he is. Swiftwing Dragon is like a poor man's Tazcad. Savage Ogre is a little bit different, right? Because it doesn't have charge, but it kind of gives pseudo charge. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut the Lawman, and we're gonna put in 2 of these. And we're going to go back to our Ogre and stick in a 3rd one of those. This gives us a lot more what's generally considered reach in the end of the game. So ways that you can kind of burst your opponent down. And then we're going to come over here, and we're going to look to add some additional options. So Conjuration Scholar is a great option to consider because it does create something that has 5 power, as does Icewing Dragon. And then when you get to the agility side, sadly there's not really a lot in agility that jumps out for our Dagoth triggers. So you have to ask yourself, like, what are going to be the best options? Now if we had flicker effects or things that could take advantage of this summon ability, we might consider that, but we really don't. So you then have to weigh yourself against, do you want the dragon shackle effect? Or if you go back to strength, we also have this dragon that has the battle effect, and this is a 7/3 versus a 6/4. Both will still trigger. I'm personally a big fan of the Icewing Dragon effect. I think that the Shackle is underrated. And so now as we start looking through our options here, we're seeing things kind of come together, kind of shaping our way into a nice mid-range style deck. I would like to get maybe a little bit more out of this, but we do still have to cut one more card. So as we go through, there's kind of like one thing that sticks out that doesn't belong right now. That's potentially Skirmisher's Elixir. And I swear I'm not slurring my words on purpose there. Didn't mean to sound like Sean Connery, but I did, so that's a thing. And then also the Fighters Guild Steward that we were kind of talking about earlier, because 4 is probably the right spot to make the cut. So of those, this one does still help us get our triggers. The other one helps us take advantage of our triggers, but the other one is kind of a nice tempo play. Ash Piercer is also in here as well, and we wouldn't mind trying to fit in one more of those as we think about tempo plays. So I think what we're actually going to do is cut the Stewards. And then we're going to go ahead and stick in one last Ash Piercer. And this is what we are going to settle on. So again, this is not going to, you know, immediately take you to rank 1 legend by any means. But these are some pretty basic changes that you can make to the Dagoth's Might premade. All commons and rares with the exception of the one Leaf Lurker that we put in. And all from sets that you can craft from, so pack-based sets. So we're going to go ahead and say done, and then we're going to jump onto not the ranked ladder, because unfortunately I'm high enough where this would just not be competitive, but we will jump into a casual game so that we can showcase, you know, the deck, how it plays, how the cards we included work, and give you an idea for what you're trying to do, what your game plan is with a deck like this. So here we go, jumping into a game. We got paired up against somebody with a pretty fantastic username, if I do say so myself. Stop, you violated the law. Alright, so when you're looking for your mulligans here, you might be tempted to say, hey, we got our god. We want to keep this, but he costs 12. So it's a dead card for almost the entirety of the game. So we're going to go ahead and throw that back and that back. We have the ring, so keeping this as a 3-drop is risky, but we're going to go ahead and try it. Because if we had a 2-drop and then getting this as a follow-up, this would have been a pretty fantastic opener. And there is our 2-drop. So we're going to start by playing into the field lane. We want to get control of the field lane, and since we're playing creatures first, this means that we will hopefully get control of the field lane by fighting and winning here. Alright, so now we've got a Thieves Guild recruit, but we also have this Battle Spear off of the ring, so let's go ahead and do that. Not only does this let us trade here, but it also means that we get a rally effect off. So now we have a 3/4 body. Again, we have control of this lane.
If you're looking for trouble, you'll find it.
That's actually a very nice top deck for us. I would love to gatekeeper this and then swing. However, the problem with that is it doesn't take this out. But we do need to get rid of this at some point. And this only has a 1 power, so it might not be able to do too much. This is actually the path we're going to take. Ultimately, we have to get that off the board either way. So as annoying as it is that we can't do it this turn, we're going to keep it up. We're going to get those precious rally procs ourselves. We do have 2 cards that cycle. So while our hand looks relatively small, it's not as bad as it looks. We will get some additional value out of these.
Honor and blood.
Let's go ahead and do that. And then let's ship this over.
What have we here?
Go ahead and do this as well.
Your blood will
Get our
spill.
rally. So they will end up with a 2-for-1 there, but it's really like a 2 for 1.5 because the cycles.
We'll never give ground.
Ooh, we found our hand, which is very, very nice.
Scales
So this is obviously a really, really good card to play, and it's even better to play on curve. However, we need to take this out. And so one of the ways that we can do that is with our good buddy here, Hatchery Meddler. So I'm a big fan of this card. I like this a lot. Not only does it trigger your Dagoth stuff, but it lets you do crazy combat tricks like this.
Your blood will spill.
So we do have a very big Elderly Matron, and we have a very resilient Hand of Dagoth. They play the Commander. Their squad is now much, much bigger. We do still want to fight for control of the field lane here, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make this trade, and then play the hand.
Submit or come to die.
Now again, our hand is significantly smaller, but this does put another card into our hand, and we have broken 1 rune. So when you factor in the cards on board, cards in hand, so on and so forth, it's not as dire as it would seem. So this could trade in here. However, if we lightning bolt this first and then swing, the ward will protect our creature. So that is going to be the path that we take. You want to bolt first, because if we don't bolt first, we don't get to take advantage of the breakthrough damage, and we do want to generate some pressure here.
You've never understood my work.
And then we're going to go ahead and play this Oathman, but we're going to play this to the right side for a couple of reasons. First, because we already have 2 creatures here, so we have pretty strong control, but also we're playing against a Spellsword player who's now at 8 Magicka, so if they do run Dawn's Wrath, and I don't suspect it because of what we've seen so far, this is probably more like a mid-range, like rally Spellsword, but just in case, it's a weird control version.
Are the Empire.
Or even more so if they place like
Empire has no place.
Jarl on the board.
My sword is yours.
How interesting. How interesting. So
The stuff
we have that there. We have a scimitar here
You've never
to protect this.
understood my work.
Let's go ahead and run over the Jarl, and then we'll use our last ring charge and get this off as well. Because again, we kind of want to maintain control of the board. We're not worried about like an Ice Storm or anything like that because they are a Spell Sword. And this is kind of how mid-range plays. If you get more valuable creatures, well, okay. And after all of that posturing, I'm immediately punished. But as I was starting to say, that's how mid-range plays. You kind of get control of the board, and then you want to snowball your presence as best as possible. Raging Horker. What a Horker. We're actually going to hold these in our hand. Actually, we're going to play the Horker. If they have another Immolating Blast, that's a problem. But if they don't, then we want to be able to threaten lethal from both lanes.
We'll never give ground.
So we have 6 over here and 6 over here, and so that's why we're doing it that way. Okay, so this should give us lethal unless they have a prophecy. So what we're going to do is we're going to play Savage Ogre here to buff our guy that has breakthrough.
Careful there, friend.
And then actually we're going to misplay that horribly. If you're watching that at home, that was a misclick, and that's why I zoned out for a moment there. So anyway, this is the deck winning. As you see, we jumped right on. We got a victory. Don't pay any attention to that misclick. Holy cow, that's embarrassing. That was meant to ward the hand, as you might imagine. So yeah, other than my horrible misplay, because I'm recording this rather late, or as I should say early in the AM, there you have it. That is the modified deck in action. We hopped right into a game, 1-1. That's with some minor changes. You just play it like a mid-range deck, fight for control of the board, try to utilize some of the synergy that you get from the Dagoth cards, and that's it. Thanks for watching, and until next time, may you walk on warm sands.